Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and I am so grateful that you're joining us today, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Today is going to be a very interesting discussion. I am with Lauren Sisler, who probably many of you listening, especially the sports fans among us, may know Lauren. She is a sports broadcaster. And she is with ESPN and the SEC Network. She has a very exciting vita, and I'm so happy to have her here today. Lauren, thank you for joining me on the SavvyCast.
Yes, so excited to be on here. I love following all your adventures, your advice, your tips, all the good stuff that you put out there. Because as we all know, we're all a work in progress, trying to figure out this thing called life. Yeah. And that's kind of my MO too, just figuring out how I can continue to get better and grow. And I'm just thankful to be part of the community here in Alabama and Birmingham. And I just appreciate you having me on.
Well, I am thrilled to have you on, and we have several mutual friends, and they said, oh my goodness, you've got to have her on. She is fabulous. And I can tell from our pre-podcast discussion that we're going to be fast friends, and you are adorable on every level. So let's just start I start by asking everyone the same icebreaker question. And it is, what would you choose as your last meal?
Woo, that is a great icebreaker. Look, I'm going to go ahead and put out here because I'm an open book. I like to tell people I'm a tell-all unless I'm told otherwise, right? Unless I'm told to keep things anonymous.
Yeah.
I'm good at keeping secrets as well. But I will say that I am all in on buffets, and people think I'm crazy. They're like, "Ooh, are you serious?" And I'm like, yes. Like, give me a good salad bar and some hot rolls with honey butter, and I'm happy and I'm set. A good soup or something like that. So obviously I joke about all the time, and that's where I really bring myself down a few levels here, because I'm one of those that will take a buffet, give me a $15 buffet any day over a $70 steak, and I am all good.
Oh my goodness. You're fabulous. I love you already. There's no pretense about you. I mean, looking at you, you would not know you were that, because you're adorable. I love that, because I grew up, that after church, we went to, Piccadilly and Morrison's, the cafeteria experience is a little different from a buffet. But now I do have to ask you on that note, where do you find a buffet anymore? I really haven't seen it. My favorite, we used to have a Jason's Deli right here in Inverness.
Yes, I know.
And they're gone. And I have had such angst because
that's kind of, you can pick from the menu, but you can also go to the salad bar and get, get kind of a mixture of things.
Yeah.
I will say I frequent Golden Corral, as that is something that I find on the road a lot. So when I'm traveling for ESPN, which is funny, I know, it's become like my pregame meal. And a big reason for that is because we go such a long stretch of time when people think, oh, you go to cover a football game. Well, you're not just on the football field for 4 hours of the game, right? You're showing up 3 hours in advance. You got to do post game. There's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. So with that being said, you got to fuel up, right? And so for me, it's all about fueling up. And so a lot of times I'll get that late lunch going into the football game. And of course, people joke with me. They're like, man, that's such a high risk. What if you get something that makes your stomach upset? And I'm like, hasn't happened yet. So I just stick with it. So, I think what I love about buffet so much is I love to try a little bit of everything. Right. So I'm an appetizer. If you say to me, hey, we're going to go over to this person's house and watch a game, which I don't get to do a lot of because obviously I'm covering a game.
Right.
But I am all about the appetizer food. So I will take that any day over a full meal, or just give me a 10-course meal. Then I try a little bit of everything. So I think that is what is the fascination, and what I love so much about a buffet is just trying a little bit of everything. So
love it. Oh my goodness.
So, we could talk all day about that, but
that's
I'm always up for it. Appetizers and all those good little eats. So,
oh my goodness. Well, you know what? It's people hate on buffets, and I think that's sad. They're a good buffet, it's good. It's the way a lot of us grew up. It reminds me of a church potluck, which you don't really see those
Yes.
anymore. But you get to taste what every sweet little church friend brings, and
Yep.
it's great. So I love
Usually
that.
always the best macaroni and cheese, in my
Yep.
opinion.
That's
Always had the best mac and cheese.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I love that. I've never had that answer, but I love it. Go.
Okay, well, I'm glad I was able to really like shatter the ice this time.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, Lauren, let's just start by tell us what you do. Now, first of all, I do want to point out you go by Lauren Sisler, but you are married to John, and Willard is your technical last name, but because you are known in the industry, I'm sure it just behooves you to keep your last name for that.
I go by Lauren Sisler, but essentially, well, and not legally yet, because we all know COVID pandemic really set things in motion for really slow processes. And so I've kind of been hesitant to kind of get everything squared away, because I had to get a passport and get it expedited and all these things. But then you have to do all these things to even get your name changed. So I'm still in the process of officially changing my name, but Lauren Sisler Willard. So I proudly take my husband's name as Willard. But yes, of course, go by Lauren Sisler. And, I'm certainly proud to honor my family's name as well. So
awesome. Well, Lauren, tell us what you do and how. Now, let me just say, you are yourself an athlete, or you were a college gymnast and high school, correct? Okay. So just tell us how you got into the sports world and where you are today.
Yeah. So obviously, as a former gymnast, I grew up around sports my entire life. My brother was a 3-sport athlete. It was rare that you wouldn't find my father on the sidelines coaching, volunteer coaching. My mom and my dad were very involved in our sports. So he was a 3-sport athlete. I got into gymnastics at the early age of 3, became competitive by the age of 5, and knew that was like the sport, right? It ends up being really a full-time job. So you make that commitment. Okay, gymnastics is my sport. So I really didn't have time for other sports. And I would say really into middle school and into early years of high school is when I really dedicated myself to earning a scholarship. And a lot of that was just the hours you put in, 20, 25 hours a week. I was commuting over an hour each way to practice, and, traveling every other weekend for gymnastics competitions around the state, around the region, and around the country, mostly in the Southeast. And so it was just something that I had my sights set on. And it's funny, and I tell this to people because I'm sitting down right now, but I'm actually 5'9", which is a little too tall to be a gymnast. Most people are always like, wait, what? Gymnastics? And I'm like, yep, that is very true.
Is it difficult? I've always heard that. Is it difficult because of the bar, the beam? I mean, what aspect?
Yeah, most I would say number one, like your center of gravity is different. So when you're more compact, everything you do is just more compact, right? So you flip and spin and twist and do all those things a lot more seamlessly. So, if you're talking about some of the greats like Simone Biles and Carly Patterson and the girls I grew up watching, Dominique Luciano and Dominique Dawes, Carrie Strug, we're talking 5 foot, maybe 5'1", being 5'9". So that's a big one. Now, bars was actually shockingly my best event. But yeah, so I had my sights set on gymnastics, gymnastics scholarship. And I actually wanted to be a sports doctor growing up, believe it or not. So a lot of people always think, well, how'd you end up in sports broadcasting? Well, that's a whole nother story. And I imagine we'll dive into that. But for me, I wanted to be a sports doctor. And a lot of that came from the fact that as a gymnast, you deal with a lot of injuries, just significant injuries throughout your entire career. And I realized that I could maybe help other athletes to essentially get back out onto the floor or onto the field or onto the court to continue to pursue and strive for their dreams, as I knew how important it was for me to have those doctors and those physical therapists and those athletic trainers really kind of helping along the way in those different stages of recovery. So that's really where I had my sights set from a very early age. And then I get to college and, I'm doing my pre-med biologies, and it was a struggle. I mean, there was a transitional period, obviously going from high school to college, like, whoa, like this is real life. And you're having to kind of manage that. Plus I'm an athlete. So that's another layer to this thing of I'm having to block out X amount of time for, 4 or 5 hours a day for gymnastics. And then also keep up my studies. But when I was at Rutgers and, kind of had a obviously a tragic event that I'm sure we'll get into, that really kind of forced me to step back and say, okay, like, is this really what I'm meant to do? Is this really what I'm passionate about? Is this something I really and truly love? And I love the sports part of it, and I love the people part of it, but I didn't love the science part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, I just struggled in some of those areas and just realized, like, what am I passionate about? What can I do that has significant meaning and purpose? And that's when I kind of, really started that reevaluation process. And with the help of my academic advisors and people at Rutgers, discovered, okay, sports broadcasting, maybe that's a great opportunity, something great that I can excel in. And I love developing relationships. I love telling stories. And that's sort of where I landed on sports broadcasting, and have just kind of worked my way up in the industry over the course of time.
Well, now Rutgers, remind me, that's
New Jersey.
New Jersey. That's right. Okay.
The State University of New Jersey. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So how did you end up, what came first, ESPN, SEC, and are you with both, and what's your role?
Yeah. So really kind of with the TV business, like anything else, you kind of have to pay your dues. You have to really put in your time and get your repetition. And, it truly is just patience, right? Mm-hmm. And taking those critical steps, so for me, it was just, starting out learning television. I worked at CNBC for a year in New Jersey and learned television from the ground up, went to a couple local TV stations and really got my feet wet and made mistakes, and just kind of went through the growing pains of learning how to be a broadcaster and how to be a journalist, how to be a storyteller, and then landed here in Birmingham, Alabama in 2011. So I've been here just over a decade. So I'd like to, say that maybe I'm an Alabamian. I feel like I've been indoctrinated into this culture, this life, and very much a warm, wide-armed welcome. So I'm very thankful for that.
Well, now I've got to ask you, I have to stop and ask you this, because everyone, at least in the SEC, is going to want to know at the outset, who's your team?
I mean, here's the deal. As a journalist, you can't be biased unless you, of course, went to that school and played at that school. So really my heart is Rutgers. So I always tell people, I've got one of my protein shakes sitting here. So whenever you see this color, I always say, that's not crimson, y'all, that's scarlet. So I always make sure people know that any shade of red to me is scarlet. So of course, I got my Coke Zero can, that sort of thing. So no allegiance. I always say though, that I always am pulling for the team, whoever I'm covering on any given day, because being in a locker room after a team is lost, especially in a significant game, like a national championship, it is not fun interviewing and talking with those guys afterwards. So I will say I do not carry an allegiance in that, but what is really cool. So we talk about like kind of the ascension, here to Birmingham. I worked at the local CBS affiliate for 5.5 years, and then transitioned to AL.com, where I kind of entered into the digital world, digital news and sports. And I still work there and provide content for them, and have done some really fun projects. And, there's a lot of creative content you can do in the digital sphere, right? That sometimes local TV and the broadcast television world doesn't allow you to do. And even ESPN sometimes, because I'm told, hey, you got 30 seconds to tell a story. And it's like, holy moly, how am I going to tell this amazing story in 30 seconds? Like, that's unfair. When you ask about ESPN, SEC Network, basically ESPN is SEC Network is under that umbrella. So when I started out, it was with SEC Network, because I was primarily covering SEC football. My first college football game was in October of 2016. And I knew nothing about being a sideline reporter. I just kind of went out there and did it. And it was terrifying, but exciting all at the same. And then I just kind of added a couple more games. I did SEC Nation for 2 years, which was in 2017 and 2018. And that's with Laura Rutledge and Paul Feinbaum and Tim Tebow and Marcus Spears were on that show. So that was kind of like the SEC Network's version of College Game Day. So much fun. Loved working with that group of people. Learned so much. And then I transitioned over to games in 2019. So that kind of got me outside of the SEC footprint, in which I was very much, kind of all over the place. And what I love about it, so you asked me like, okay, who's your team, right? So obviously you have a rooting interest, and there's things that you love about your team for a specific reason. But what I've loved about this process too is learning so much more about other conferences, other teams, and every school, every program, every team has a different personality. Yeah. And so you kind of get a taste of different the way things are done and the way business is handled, and really just the personality of the teams and the players within that team. And that's really what's been a lot of fun, kind of branching outside of just the SEC and experiencing other conferences as well around the country.
Yeah, and I would think that working with all the different players and the coaches and the people at every school, you have a love or a place in your heart for every one of those places. So
yeah,
I just asked that because I'm Auburn, went there, grew
well,
up.
there you go. We got to I was actually about to flip the question to you and say,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And if you're Auburn or Alabama, that's really what's important of the season, and of course they always have a great season. And, sometimes
you gotta feel out the room too. Like when you walk into a room, you gotta be like, okay, am I in good company here? Or am I gonna have to kind of keep it on the DL that I'm an Auburn fan? Like, how's this gonna work? Right. But
but in the end, we're all great, love each other. You can't, alienate yourself. You'd lose half your friends, there's such a vibe. But okay. Well, so your busy time of life is fall. I'm assuming that's when it kicks in. So basically, just give us a snapshot of what it looks like when fall comes, and here you go.
So the fall is quite interesting, obviously, with lots of travel and pretty much being on the road. So my dear husband, John, has to kind of deal with me not being here for the majority of the fall. I typically travel on Thursday, sometimes Fridays. It just depends. But kind of a day or a week in the life of Lauren during football season, I call it like, think about when you were back in school and you have to get ready for a final exam. Okay. And so you were putting all your eggs in that basket and you were studying your tail off. And if you're like most people, you probably procrastinate and you wait to that final week to get ready and study for that exam. And you are just cramming it all in. So that's really what happens. I get my game assignment on Sundays and they say, okay, you're going to go here. All right. So, let's just say I'm covering, I'll say Auburn, Arkansas, right? So these are the two teams I'm covering. So I'm going to go travel to Auburn. So I got to learn everything there is to know about this Auburn football team, just about the players, the coaches, the injuries, everything that's kind of happened up until that point. And then I also got to learn the same information about Arkansas. And then what ends up happening is we have production meetings. We talk with our crew. So obviously we're kind of all based out of different parts of the country. One of my dear friends and confidants, Kelly Stauffer, he's an analyst and he was a former NFL player. He and I have worked together a couple of years now. He lives out in Nebraska, right? So he's always zooming in from, halfway across the country. And, then my other, colleague is maybe coming to us from South Carolina. And so we all kind of get together, put our heads together, come up with ideas, decide what the narrative and what do we want to share with our, audience. We have those production meetings. And then essentially we kind of dive into the meetings with the coaches. And because of COVID, a lot of those have turned into Zoom meetings versus them being in person. Now, personally, I would love to do them in person. I think you get a different sense and a different type of communication and really vibe from the coaches and players when you're in person, face to face, having those conversations. I think it gets a little more personal and you can do that. But obviously Zoom being on at least having some sort of face to face interaction, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, that's where we get a lot of our information. So my job as a storyteller is to figure out what these stories are and what is the foundation of this team? What is that sort of the mantra? What is this built on? Okay. The star running back over here has this incredible story. How do I share his story? How do I make the viewer at home? So Jamie, let's just say you're not an Auburn fan and you tune into the Auburn Arkansas game. Well, why do you care? Why do you care about this other than the X's and O's? Well, if I give you a story about the quarterback or the running back or some defensive player that overcame some amazing, incredible, triumphant story, then you're going to maybe root a little harder for that team, right? Or that player. And it humanizes the game versus it just being another football game. And so really that's where the coaches meetings come in and we talk to the players. And then that's how we kind of craft all of our information. I condense it into what I think might be useful for in-game content. And then of course the game takes care of itself, I'm on eyes and ears on the field. And then it's rinse and repeat. Like you really almost have to ball it up, throw it in the trash and start over because your brain is just jammed so full of so much information from that one game. You have to be able to like kind of clear it out and then move on to the next game. So,
and you
really,
only have a week. Well,
yeah.
Actually, each week you get another assignment.
Yep.
Okay.
So really only like 5 or 6 days to truly prepare for a game and prepare for the teams that you're covering.
Okay. And this shows that I'm not the biggest sports enthusiast. How many teams are in the SEC?
So there's 14 teams in the SEC. There's actually about to be 2 more with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the fold.
Okay.
But that being said, yeah, I mean, 14 teams, that's a lot. And, you can't, I wouldn't even be able to answer how many Division I teams there are around the country. I'd have to go back and look at that from a football standpoint. But there's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and it's a revolving door because while your roster might look the same, hey, your starting quarterback is out, your, starting center, your starting offensive lineman, there's a lot of shifts and things happening. And so you really have to kind of be agile and be able to kind of move and shift and, kind of conform to the narrative and what is key information on a given week.
Mm-hmm. So, and you just cover football, correct? And
yeah, mostly college football. I've done some NCAA gymnastics in the past. Unfortunately, I wish that I was continuing to do NCAA gymnastics, but they've kind of shifted some of the way that they're doing their coverage for that. And I have to admit, we have a lot of very talented broadcasters that were former gymnasts that also have the credential of being former Olympians. So obviously having that credential is a big one. And, certainly love watching the work that they do. And I'm good friends with a lot of them. But it is fun to see that gymnastics is getting a lot of credit, and you're getting to see more of that on the national stage, which is really cool for the sport of gymnastics.
Would you say for the girls listening what you're doing is their dream one day? Is that a predominantly or equally divided by gender field covering?
Well, I mean, I think there's always been a precedent that has been set that it's a male dominated industry, and from really top to bottom, it tends to be a male dominated industry, especially in football, right? Because I never took a snap of football and I'm not going to pretend that I did. And when I have questions and don't understand what a coach just said, I'm going to ask about it. I might not ask the coach. I might go over here and ask my analyst. I'm not afraid to ask questions because at the end of the day, I'd rather understand it and get it right on the broadcast than just pretend and act like I knew exactly what that coach was talking about, because some of that terminology is like over my head, right? But also in the gymnastics world, a lot of that terminology is over their head. They would never understand an ounce of what I'm talking about in the gymnastics world. So with that being said, I would say to those that are listening, while it is a male dominated industry, I think that the playing field has been leveled in many ways. And I think that the key, especially in this industry, is really just to be authentic, be true to yourself and know, like, you do your homework, you research, you study, and you put in the work that you can achieve a high level. No, you might not sit in the analyst chair as the person that played the sport, but you can come to the table with as much knowledge. And really it's about developing those relationships and really being able to hone in on that craft of storytelling, which I think is really important.
Well, I would like for you now to share another side of your world. And you do a lot of speaking throughout the year. And can you just share with us, and you've already referenced that all of your life has not been in this world of sports and excitement. You've had some tragedy, but you're using that to help others. So share with us what you're doing in that regard.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Jamie, to share in that. And, I definitely take these opportunities to heart because obviously, as you said, life is not easy. Life is not always what it seems. And I think a lot of times we all, me included, get caught up on social media and what are people doing? And, oh, life is so grand. And, you're getting a snapshot of someone's life, but you're not seeing all the divots and the ruts and the potholes and all the things that are in between on this pathway and this road of life. And for me, I think, I grew up living what I thought was the all-American dream. I had a family that was loving, parents that loved me unconditionally, were very involved in my athletics and academics along with my brothers. We were a close family. We were close. There was always a meal on the table. My mom was a great cook. She loved to cook. And, I just remember sharing a lot of great memories with both of my parents and my family. I felt like I had it made growing up, and then, transitioned to Rutgers. I'm living out my dream. I'm excited about the road ahead. Second semester. Yeah. Like I said, it's a bit of a struggle trying to navigate this new life and this new, these responsibilities as a college athlete. And, life was still going as what I thought was scripted, and that I was living out this dream of mine. And, again, I was really close with both my parents, and I always joke about this because I always hear kids talk about oh, I talk to my parents maybe once a week while I'm away at school. And that was not me. That was not the case. I was burning up the phone lines, talked to my parents almost every day, whether it was on the phone, through email. This was, of course, before texting was a big thing, but picked up the phone pretty much every single day, multiple times, to have conversations with both of them. And so this was my second semester. It was March 23rd of 2003. And I picked up the phone like I always did. And mind you, I'm the kid also that my parents tucked me in every single day until the day that I left for college. So my parents, I just had that relationship with them.
What did they do?
My mom, she worked several different jobs. So she worked part-time mostly to kind of keep my brother and I out of daycare. And so she could get us to our sporting events and all those things. And my dad was a biomedical engineer at the VA Medical Center in Roanoke, Virginia, where I grew up in Salem. He was also in the military. So prior to that, when I was born, and then just those early years of my childhood. But yeah, so my parents very involved in the community. We went to church every Sunday, not every Sunday, but, for the most part, we were very committed to going to church and saying our prayers before bedtime. And, my parents would tuck me in at night, and I felt very fortunate and blessed to have very loving parents. And so fast forward to my second semester at Rutgers, and I pick up the phone like I always do, talking with my mom about my gymnastics practice. I'd been working on a new bar routine, a new skill, a new sequence on bars, and felt like I was making a lot of progress. And so I was excited to share that with her, and then handed off the phone to my dad. And we were talking for a few minutes, and he was just telling me how proud he was. And I remember just my parents, seemed fine. Everything seemed normal. And we said our I love yous and our goodbyes, and hung up the phone and didn't really think much of it. And I was studying for exams that night. I set my alarm clock, was talking to my roommate for a little bit, and then fell asleep, and woke up shortly after to a phone call from my dad. And he was very distraught, and you could tell something was wrong when I answered the phone. And he said, "Lauren, your mom died." And I was just in shock, because I'm thinking, how, I just talked to mom. I just talked to you. Everything seemed fine. It's the middle of the night. I don't understand. And my dad said, "I just need you to get on the next plane you can, and I'll be at the airport to pick you up." And so, of course, I'm having to make all these arrangements, figure out how I'm going to get on this flight. I didn't have enough money to even pay for a plane ticket. I didn't even know how to write a check. I didn't have a credit card. There was all these things I'm trying to figure out. I'm 18 years old. Thankfully, my roommate was able to help step in and sort of help me in that process. I get to the airport. I land in my hometown in Roanoke, Virginia, at the airport there. And, all I wanted to do was run and jump in my dad's arms. All I wanted to do was for him to tell me everything was going to be okay. And, that was so important to me. And as I walk outside and I'm waiting for my dad to show up, instead it was my cousin and my uncle who had to inform me that my dad too had passed away. And so not only do I leave New Jersey to come home to find out that my mom obviously had already passed away, then hours later, my father also passes away. And now I'm faced with this new reality of life without my two best friends and the two people that I loved so dearly, and that were loved by so many, and with so many questions. And I can tell you, Jamie, even to this day, while some of those questions have been answered, there are still so many questions of why, how did this happen? And I think questions that maybe we'll never know. And, we just kind of have faith and trust in the good Lord above that, that, he has the answers to that. And, they may never be answered here on this earth, but, leaning into my faith, knowing that, while this is tragic circumstances, how can we take these tragic circumstances and make something positive out of it?
So you were at the airport and you were greeted by an uncle and a cousin, and that's when you got the news
Yeah.
that the parents you spoke with less than 12 hours prior or 24 hours prior were both gone. So how did you go from there?
Well,
I mean, that's hard for anyone, but at your age, wow. At 18, you're still that's so young.
yeah.
Wow.
And I think, you say young, and I think that sometimes it is lost on me at how young that was, because again, when I think back to really just, I didn't know how to write a check. Like I said, financially,
Yeah.
my parents were always focus on your schoolwork, focus on your gymnastics. We'll take care of the rest. I didn't have time to get a job
Yeah.
in high school. I didn't have time for other outside obligations and things like that and activities. So it was really just a very structured, kind of lifestyle. And, my parents obviously took great care of us. We were spoiled in many ways, but also reality was reality. And, there were some financial issues and some things that my parents kind of battled with behind the scenes, but many of those things unbeknownst to us as a family. And as we are flipping the page to this next chapter of life without both of my parents, I had to make a decision. Okay, do I stay home or do I go back to school? And really, there was nothing there for me at home. My aunt and uncle really stepped in and kind of took the reins as sort of my guardians, even though I was 18. Two people that have been instrumental in my life and have been such a guiding light for me and helped me to kind of redefine my pathway to success. But they pretty much said to me, like, you've got a commitment to your school, you've got a commitment to your teammates, your team, and this is what your parents would want. And we think it's in your best interest to go back to school and not take time off. And honestly, I think that was a really smart and wise decision, because time does not stand still. And I think that while I was grieving and was going through this process, I was surrounded by people at Rutgers, my teammates and my Rutgers family, that I truly believed helped to guide me and really honestly save my life in this process, and gave me something to wake up for and to be excited about, and dreams to continue to dream instead of kind of cowering in a corner and giving up. And so I am thankful for that. But, it was a process for me, because I had to walk through this journey of figuring out what happened with my parents, how they passed away, the significance of their passing, and again, answering these questions, right? Why did this happen to us? Why did this happen to my family? How could this happen to my parents? Two people that were loved by so many and such great people. Mm-hmm. And then months later, we would finally find out through the toxicology reports that both my parents, in fact, passed away from fentanyl overdoses. So fentanyl is what they were taking. It was actually prescribed to my mom as a pain patch. Both my parents had been struggling with chronic pain. They had been going to a pain management doctor in Roanoke, and my mom had multiple surgeries. She was dealing with degenerative disc disease. And then my father had chronic back pain and some, issues with some PTSD from his service in the military. And, they were doing everything they could to stay above water. They were doing everything they could emotionally and physically, the pain that they were feeling, and then even financially trying to just stay above water. And sadly, I think, and what I truly feel in my heart is they inherited the shame that they weren't able to speak up and to be able to tell people that they were struggling with this and that they needed help.
And I know from just reading and hearing from other sources that have issues like this, that this is not an uncommon problem, and that so much of what is prescribed by trusted medical physicians can get out of control so easily. And how has that led you to what you're doing today outside of the work you do in the sports world?
Yeah.
What are you using to what's your biggest message when you go and you speak?
Well, I use the word shame because while I see now hindsight, there are things that led me to realize, okay, maybe my parents were struggling during that time. But I was uneducated in that realm of addiction. I didn't understand what addiction it was. My dad struggled with alcoholism when I was growing up, but it was very much in my mind, under control, right? He was going to A meetings, he was staying involved and going to counseling and really keeping some of those emotions and things that led him to drink, under control. And I was able to compartmentalize it as a kid, right? When you're growing up, like kids are resilient, and I was able to just kind of box it up and like, okay, move on, move on. So I never recognized it as a problem. I just knew that when he drank, well, that's probably not a good idea. We need to not drink. And so, my message to people as I become more educated and have a better understanding of what addiction is and how it impacts people in such a significant way is there's that piece of shame that people feel. And it's not even just with addiction, with substances, whatever it is you're going through in life, whether it is a mental health illness, whether it is an addiction, or maybe there's an infidelity, or maybe there's a decision or a mistake that has been made, or a choice that has been made in your life that has altered the course of your life. And you've inherited this extreme amount of shame. Well, for me, that's what I did, right? So my parents passed away. I go back to school and I'm sort of just running from reality. I am just running as far as I can from reality, because to me, if I didn't acknowledge how my parents died, if I was able to just sort of mask what ultimately happened to them, and people didn't really know the truth behind what happened to my parents, then ultimately maybe it didn't happen, right? So I tell the sugar-coated story because to me, my biggest fear was, okay, Jamie, I don't know you. And so if I'm meeting you for the first time and you ask me a question about my family, my story, whatever, I was so afraid to tell the truth because I was fearful that maybe you would judge me for that. Maybe you would treat me differently. Maybe you would think differently. So when I would go apply for, job, I would be terrified that they would Google search and figure out that both of my parents died from prescription drug overdoses, because to me, that would be viewed as a character flaw, that my parents had a character flaw. And in reality, that wasn't the case. And really my aunt helped me to recognize, like, my parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. And that to me is so important. And what I hope to, share with other people, that whatever challenges they're going through, the shame that they're inheriting, they don't have to, and that they can emerge from the shadows of shame and walk with courage and with that fortitude to say, hey, you know what? Life happens. This is my story. This is who I am, but it has shaped me. It has molded me, and it has only made me a better person and given me strength to be resilient and to move forward.
So when you speak and people come up to you at the end, I'm sure you speak at a lot of schools. What are some stories that you've heard that you're just like, wow, I can't believe that this isn't just common to me, that this is something so many people, are you seeing that is something a lot of younger people are facing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think
parents are having it in the family and not knowing how to process.
And I think that's where, our society has stigmatized things and kind of given this label, right? Putting this label on what an addict is supposed to look like, or what mental health is supposed to look like. But it comes in so many different shapes and sizes and forms. And some people are just really good at masking it. And to be honest, my parents were great at it. They were great at masking it. And they really led myself and my family, my brother, and everyone around us to believe everything was okay. And so it really did come as a shock to the system for everyone when they finally learned the truth. And really, when I finally stepped up to the plate and said, okay, this is really what happened. But learning from other people's stories, number one, people are shaped by their stories. And I think people have experiences and circumstances in their lives that really shape them, mold them, and really kind of dictate maybe how they go about their lives and how they make choices and decisions, and really how they reflect on themselves and their self-value and self-worth. And so, that's one thing when I have students or people that come up to me and share their story about maybe, feeling inadequate or being bullied at school, or, I don't have the coolest shoes on because my mom can't afford it because she's an addict and she's in and out of rehab all the time. That is so painful to me, because again, that's where that child is now inheriting that shame and not really sure where to turn, where to go. Who do I talk to? How do I overcome these circumstances and show people that I am valuable, that I am worth it, that I deserve, a chance. Right. And I think that's really what, my hope and goal is, to help people navigate that and to help people understand that their uniqueness and their their, trials and tribulations and what's going on at home does not have to define them, and that they can ultimately, take the reins and, get involved in activities, get involved with different groups, surround yourself by positive people and positive people that share your same values, whether it's of faith or, hobbies or things that you truly feel motivate you, inspire you, encourage you, and surrounding you by those people. Because I do think a lot of times, again, we get caught up on the outward appearances and we get caught up on the social media and what's cool, what's important, and what's the latest trend, right? And I think it's just important for people to take a step back and realize that you can kind of create some of that for yourself. You can create what's important. You can create what inspires you, what encourages you, and what you think inspires you might be different than what does for me. But really just helping people, and even, like you said, a lot of students, but even going to like corporate events, speaking at a lot of corporate events and talking to people and helping them recognize that their stories and that their circumstances and the experiences that they've had in life don't have to define them in a negative way, right? They can use those as a catalyst for strength and growth, and ultimately, use it for some of the leadership and just really being an example and a role model. And that, that's a big thing for me and with the students and even with athletes, saying, hey, you have a chance to be a role model for other people and to help inspire and encourage and maybe shape someone else's life that may be feeling down and might be not feeling adequate and wanting to sort of reevaluate where their life is headed. And, I think that's probably one of the biggest things, just hearing these stories. They can be heartbreaking, but, hopefully providing some of that hope and light for people that are hoping for something better for their lives.
And I can see what your message is. It's don't be defined by what maybe happened negatively in your background or your parents, but pointing them forward and giving them opportunity. What are specific resources maybe that you recommend? Of course, a good church or good organization, sports. Do you have specific resources that you could mention now that you feel are places people can turn who feel like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do?
Yeah, well, I would certainly say, as a woman of faith, being involved in the church, Church of the Highlands, specifically for my husband and I, thankful for that community, thankful for those people. I think being involved in, that fellowship that you get by going to church and by going to in-person events and, doing
life with people who have your back.
Yep. And doing life with people. And I love that. Yes. Yeah. And finding your tribe, finding your people, finding people that you can relate to. And maybe they have a different story and you can learn from those people that have gone through similar situations or maybe something completely different. But, we all have scars and we all have those emotional challenges and physical challenges and things in our lives. And that's where we all share that similarity, right? We all have a story. And so I think getting involved with, groups of people, small groups, people that share the same vision or same values or want to find that next step in their lives and find that purpose, right? So I think that's a big thing, evaluating that. How can you be a servant leader? How can you help others? How can you be, volunteer at a nonprofit, volunteer at one of these food shelters? There's several organizations that provide opportunities for volunteer opportunities to help men and women who are actively in addiction and looking for recovery or, might be homeless or just need an outlet, need a place to go, being that person or, I love the idea of prison ministry. I love, I've not had the opportunity to do that, but I know several people that have, and just how rewarding it is to help these men and women realize that life is about chances, right? Not just second chances, but third chances, 10 chances, 20 chances, whatever it is, because we're all imperfect and we're all flawed in our own ways. And we're always having to learn from our choices and our mistakes, right? So I think those are big areas. And then, as it pertains to addiction specifically, there are a lot of recovery resources. The Birmingham Recovery Center is a facility that recently just opened. here locally. I know of another great resource called Impact, which is currently just for men at this point, but kind of a retreat, sort of faith-based retreat for men that are seeking recovery. And that typically is like a 90-day program, but really just starts to implement some of the key pillars that help people that are in addiction to be able to overcome some of the underlying issues that might lead them to drink and or do drugs. The Resource Recovery Center, there's the Birmingham Resource Recovery Center that is more of a hotline that allows people to sort of, I guess, essentially call in or take an assessment, and then they might be able to place each individual based on their circumstances, because it's not one size fits all. It's not one case fits all. So I think that's big. But, really just finding purpose and finding faith in everything you do. I think finding faith and hope, and knowing that, if you put in the work and if you continue working on yourself, facing forward, that there is hope and recovery, and that you can, walk through that door to a brighter tomorrow. And that those dark clouds will start to rise and start to lift, and that, there is some wonderful things that you can live for. And, that's for yourself and for people that are around you.
Well, and Lauren, it's so clear how much you loved your parents and what wonderful people they were. And I know that whether they see it now or will know it one day, I don't know for sure how that works, but they would be so proud of you, because you are a light and you're successful, but you're also dedicating a lot of your time and energy to being an inspiration and a source of help to others. And I just commend you for that. So that is amazing. And I'm going to link to all the resources that you mentioned. And I'm just so grateful for you spending your time. And can you link, let me share all the ways people can get in touch with you, follow you, and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At Lauren Sisler on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it.
You're on all the things.
I don't do a whole lot of TikToking, y'all, but
you pretty much have to do Twitter for sports, though, don't you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I usually get most of my information on Twitter, and then I post a lot of my stuff on Instagram. I'm probably on Instagram more than anything, just kind of, sharing life stuff. One other resource I do want to mention for you to link to, the Addiction Prevention Coalition. It's an organization that I am a volunteer with. I'm also on the board of directors there. And the Addiction Prevention Coalition, we also are known as APC Birmingham, BHAM. Such a great resource. So not only is there a directory of resources for people, so if you have
in each state, can you find that in each state? Because you said
the Addiction Prevention Coalition is specifically here for Birmingham, but it links to other nationwide resources as well. Okay. So there are a lot of resources, but this is specifically, for people in this community that say, okay, what are some resources I can tap into? There's also a great parent toolbox, because I think we need to empower and educate not only individuals, but, our community, our parents, to say, okay, how can I step up and be an advocate for my child to make better choices, better decisions, be educated on the things that are out there. We can't sweep it under the rug, right? That's we're all notorious for whoop, whoop, get out the broom. Let's put it under the rug. Can't do that. So you can, of course, find information out about that on APC's website, apcbham.org, or you can go to their Facebook page, which has a ton of resources as well.
Are they on Instagram as well?
Yes. Instagram and Facebook. Yep.
Okay.
And that's Addiction Prevention
Coalition.
APCBHAM.org. And then the Addiction Prevention Coalition is the tagline or the handle for that organization. And so, just thankful for organizations like that really help to bring light to this and provide resources for prevention, but also hope for recovery. And so we're all in this together. We're all fighting a fight and fighting uphill battles every day. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to be able to, as you said, be a positive light. And, there used to be a time where I would be standing on stage, sharing my story, afraid of what people would think. And now as I stand up there, I feel my parents present. I feel them standing there next to me saying, you know what, we applaud you in your ability and your courage to share this story and to be a voice for us and to share your own story and how it's impacted you and how you've been able to move through it. And so, that's my hope, is to to continue being that, and just to encourage people, whatever their challenges are. No challenge too big or too small. It needs to be addressed. And hopefully, we can all join arms and be a village of hope for one another.
Absolutely. Well, I want to end on this note, and I don't know if you were there. I know you've attended lots of the John Maxwell events, but Zane, I did not get to hear him speak at this last one, but I believe the title of his most powerful lesson, I think he spoke on several, but Zane said it was learning from your failures or growing through your failures. And Zane has heard him every year. He's attended that every year. He said, best speech I've ever heard in my life from anyone. And, Dr. Maxwell's amazing anyway. But I just think that points to how we may not like it, but probably our biggest source of growth and refinement and ultimately ability to be of benefit and blessing and encouragement to others comes from not necessarily just failures, but places of pain, places where we're not quite in control, and it looks outwardly like something that's a failure, but it's really going to spur us on to being our best. And I think that's exactly what you've been sharing. And I just thank you so much, Lauren. You're just a delight.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it. I'm super appreciative of this opportunity. Big thank you to Miss Katie Spinks for reaching out and asking me to join you. And
she's fabulous. We got great kids in our group, and hope to meet you soon and in person. And you always have a place here if there's anything great and new that you want to share in any of these regards. We got 2 different things here. Always just text and say, hey, I want to jump on, because it's so much fun talking with you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening. If you want to share, feel free to reach out on social media. I have my inbox open, so I will field your questions, comments, concerns, and your stories and whatever it is you want to share. So thank you again. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have such a blessed week and, the year ahead. 2022 is here and we are just getting started.
Yes, we are. And again, thanks to all who joined today. And until the next episode, blessings to you and yours. And thanks again for being my guest.
Thank you.